皆さんはゲーム開発の裏側って興味ありますか？俺すごい好きで、映画とかでもさ、使われなかったシーンとか、そういうのってすっごい面白いじゃん。でね、以前ゴッド・オブ・オー・ラグナロクが開発の裏側っていうかね、バグ集みたいなのを公式で載せてくれてたやつツイッターかなんかに、それすごい面白かったんだけど、今回ラストオブアスパート2のリマスター版で、このメイキングとかね、エクストラメイキングかな、このメイキングってところで未公開ステージをなんとプレイさせてくれるんですよ。本編では未公開となったステージをプレイできるってことで、使われなかったボツになったシーンをなんとプレイさせてくれるらしいじゃねえか。これすごいよね。しかもそのなんか開発者のコメンタリーも聞けるらしいから、ちょっとファンにはたまらない仕様になってますね。これも再プレイ始めて少ししか進められてないから思い出せないところもちょっとあると思うんですけれども、今回ちょっとねこの未公開ステージを楽しんでいこうかと思います。3つあるんだね。ジャクソンのパーティーとシアトルの地下水路、カリ。上から見てこっか。どっちもオンでいくよ。間に消された部分だったりすんのかな、それとも全く別のルートだったりすんのかね。
You're about to play an unfinished level from The Last of Us Part 2.
ジャクソンパーティー。
The reason we added this section is there are a few sequences and we picked the few of the best ones that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger than what ends up being the final product. They were months away from being finished, but we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built a game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art or audio or dialogue. And here you get to see the building blocks of what it's like when we first string a bunch of these levels together. This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the three. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing. And we wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play. You could mix drinks. You could play with these kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited by the sequence, it's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So
でもやっぱりさ、彼らの生活感ってものを楽しんでみたかったよね。さあ、どこから始まるんだこれは。エリの手だ。声もないんだね、だからやっぱり。ここはジャクソンの裏側かな、なんか暗い道だね。ディーナとエリーがキスした版ってことは、前回実況したところのジェシーが怒ってた前の日だね。怒ってたとか茶化してたか。
Originally, this level was going to transition us to
なるほど。
We would go all the way through to the dance where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through Farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident. So, the opening for this was a little tricky.We needed it to match at least a little what you might expect emotionally coming from prior beats. Because we were already purposefully disorienting you, and something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path. We had this idea of recontextualizing all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes,
あえて出さないことで醸し出させる良さってのもあるしね。プレイヤーに考えさせたりするっていう面もあるから。
All the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge.
確かに平和な時間が少なかったよな。いきなり地獄だからね。ちょっとは平和な時間も見たかったからね。ねえみんな。楽しくなさそうだね。楽しんでるの多分彼だけだよ。唯一ちょっと目に光が見えるけどみんな死んでるよ顔が。ほらもうなんか帰りたそうな顔してるもん。
It is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this
Oi.
is if you did well, you could win a
お
toy
お、お
here.
もちゃは
Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through
なる
anyway
ほ
because
ど
it was。so
あげた
cute.
くねえな、俺。
It
子
is
供に
the
あげ
same
ずに
one
も
you
らいて
see
え
on
や
the。tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
どこトラクターのどこここは
This is one of my favorite sections because I think that it
すごいいっ
achieves
ぱい
both
教えて
the
くれる
slice
じゃ
of
ん
life aspect of
こんなにいっぱい
Jackson,
コメントあるんだ
while
ね
also being a stark reminder of how dark
ここは
the
ガ
world
キ
that
ど
we
もと
live
遊べるわけ
in
だな
really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this
まあでも子供たちと雪合戦
adorable,
する
messed
くだり
up
はね
little
本編にも
impression,
残され
and
て
the
はいた
others
から
would
ね
giggle. We tried a version where
唯
you
一
got
の
close enough, the kids
平和
might
な
try and
時間だ
follow
ったよ
you
ね
a
あれ
little
は
before turning back.
消されなかった
Since
上での
clickers are blind and move by
お
echolocation.
すごい
For this game,
クリッカーのシーンなんだこれが
Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the
うますぎ
children
だ
give
ろお
themselves
前
away.
腰の動きと
The
か
thought was that
なん
these
それ
kids are in
プロの
relative
クリッカー
safety.
になれるぞお前
They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and
やばい負け
runners,
る
and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play.
いいじ
When
ゃ
the
ん
festival
なん
got
かちょっ
cut, they
と工
tried to
夫があっ
preserve
て
this
いい
moment and move it to the front of the game
視
where
点
the
とか
snowball
も
fight is, as a tutorial. However,
これクリ
being
ア
in
後
the
の得点
headspace
とか
of
として
clicker
残してほし
doesn't
かった
really
ね
teach you how to deal with
まあ今
that.
実際リマスター版のあれとしてあるからいいんだけ
It
どさ
evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more
確
effective.
かにそうだね
For me, the makeup artist is pretty simple.
ごめんまた飛ばしちゃっ
It's
た
one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in
こ
to
れ
make
は
it feel like
これ
Ellie
順番
had
並んでたわけじゃ
roots
な
in
く
the
て
town.
抜かしちゃって大丈夫
Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her mind, an ex-girlfriend of Ellie's tattooed her arm to cover up
なるほど。
her scar. So we figured this might be the only time you get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been so much more that had been happening and so much more that Ellie threw away.
エリーの過去についてもう少し知りたいもんねあまりにも空白が長すぎるからその部分知りたいなラスアス3とかだったらもうちょっと教えてくれるかな3出るよねだってね流れ的にはすごい棒立ちこれさっきもいなかったっけちょいちょいエリーの過去って出てきたりはするけどさジョエルと宇宙飛行士の夢について語ったりとかもうちょっと知りたいよね高校生あたりのさ
We
年
use
齢
our
の時の
workbench a lot
エリ
to
ー
make
も
a
う
lot
少
of
し知り
things
たい
that kill and maim and hurt people. Here, we had the silly idea of using the same feel, harkening back to the same animations, using the exact same UI to instead fix a drink.
おドリン
Like
ク
the
作れるんだ
workbench, you could pick your base, and then you could add
ま
something
あ
to
テ
it.
キーラ飲んどこうか
And at the time,
一杯
we
ね
had some different reactions from Ellie based on how strong you chose to make the
いいじゃん
drink. Something we wanted to prototype, though, before it got cut, was picking up some ingredients around
あ
to
まだ笑
add,
顔だ
like a lime or maybe a bottle of someone's favorite whiskey or
もう一
salt,
杯作ってみる
like you were earning upgrades. We also toyed with having Ellie carry around the drink you made and occasionally sip it, psyching herself up to go talk to Dina
え
inside. 'cause
すごい
she's
いい
nervous.
それすごいい
It
い
got too noodly though, because she would need to keep placing it somewhere before she did anything. So it would have ended up
ま
more
あ確か
trouble
に
than
ゲー
it
ム
was
と
worth.
してはねゲームとしてはあれかもしれないでも生活感を表す手段としてはめちゃめちゃいいむっちゃいいよなんならこの人たちとも喋れたら最高だね本当にすごい疲れてんなんかみんな正気がなくないこんなに楽しそうなパーティーなのに目に潤いがあるやつが少ないんだけど大丈夫かこいつは楽しそうに料理してくれてよかったけどさあ他にはこれはなんだこれも遊びっぽいねあモグラたた違うな力比べかこれはいくぞはい完璧じゃないこれ経費もらえたりするこれで褒めてもらえさえしないなんか若干多くの人は拍手したかなと思ったけど手前の人間に対してのリアクションなんだこれは多分悲しすぎるわいい年こいてお前何楽しんでんだよみたいな面で見られたんだけど褒めてくれよちょっと頑張って叩いたんだからちょっと干渉に浸るか悲しいからここは完全に大人組だねさあ入ろっかマリア入れさせてくれトメおじさんはいるジョイロは今どこいるんだろうねこの中であれだもんねキスのシーン見られてちょっと気まずい感じになっちゃうもんね確かあここまでか面白いめちゃめちゃ面白いシアトルの地下水路借りちょっと両方見るかシアトルの地下水路って何編だっけちょっともうね 覚えてるか不安。シアトル、スワーズ。
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle, this comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of a window and gets swept away by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them more for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final, but it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
いいね。あ、ここからか。ここから見せてくれる。痛いんだよ。くそ。意外と力強いなこいつ。細いくせに。ここも結構絶望だったからな。まずお前まだ抗う気か。自分の心配しろお前。まずはエリーと戦う前に。あ、でもやっぱりなんか開発段階感があるね。でもグラフィックってこんなものだったっけ。なんか波がグラフィックが荒い気がするけど、こんなもんか。まずい、死んじゃう。さあどこまでが本編で描かれたところだ。これ本編ちゃんとやってからの方が良かったねこれ。まずい、流される。もう思い出せないもん俺。待って、これ進めなくない？普通に死ぬくない？エリどうする？お前泳げないもんな。頑張れ。よかったよかったよかった。なんとかなった。シアトル最悪。もう背骨とか多分折れてるね。
This level, internally known as Fine Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. I has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the side.
確かにここで謎解きさせるのはめんどくさいかも。
However, it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves. The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player. Being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found a ladder, but then a negative to discover its solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
もうちょっといいタイミングで反対側に行かなくちゃいけないから。こっちから飛んでこっか。すぐそこまで行くためにはこの辺りで頑張ってもらうしかないよ。頑張れエリ。よし、いい子だ。多分もう背骨7本ぐらい折れてる。これ反対側行けるんじゃない？その前にちょっとコメント読もうか。
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end.
でも広がってたりする。
The real reason for this dead end room is that on the reversal, when exiting back out of the doorway,
なるほど、四角いのに使ってるんだこの辺を。
A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out. Throughout the rest of the level, we also use light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. I think we slowly introduced the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This is to slowly build up to and encourage the player to climb into such small pipes that have to be crawled over the tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item. And we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface.
何があるかな。おお、いいじゃん。爆発物も。ビーム取ってな、しっかり。戻ろう。こんな汚くなりながら爆発物のアイテム一つぐらいいらないよ。
We love the idea of making Ellie
こん
pray
中
through
も
a
通る
tiny
のか。
dirty pipe
いや、ここ
in
は
order
確
to
実に
get
通ってない
out,
記憶があるわ。
as it was a great opportunity to use our pray mechanic.
このくらい
The
へっ
unique
ちゃらで
camera
しょ。
setup was created to support
なるほど
crawling
ね。
in
プ
these
レイヤーに
pipes,
ほふ前進を
as
覚
the
えさせるみたい
standard
な
frame camera is
あ
much
れもあ
higher
るの
above
かね
the。player. We also created
またこ
custom
れ外
collision in
見え
order
ね
for Ellie to maneuver in these tight spaces easily.
見えねえか。
Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game.
やっぱボツになったところもかなりしっかりしてんだ。ゴミとかも。
In order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic, and desperate, we'd been enforcing
そういうの考えられてるんだね、
mechanics
しっかり
that
と。
allow for a tight
わざと
environment, which promote
作っ
these
てんだ、
feelings.
狭いところとかっ
We
て。
introduced the use
演
of
出
the
のために。
squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed
ロー
and
ドとかの
tight
ためだけじゃないんだ
without
ね、
repeating
狭い
the
ところ
same
って。
geometry. Here we changed from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from
横に狭く
repeating
なってる
itself.
気づかないかも。
ここで死ぬのだけはマジ勘弁。
まあでも確かにさ、テンポ感とか単調にならないように下水道を削ったっていい判断かもしれないけど、これはこれで楽しいからね。
Originally, we had the water line much higher here, so players had to swim through this
はい
tight
はい
tunnel.
はい。
However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely
なる
and
ほど。
turn back on themselves.
水嫌いだ
So
もん
to
ね、みん
avoid
な。
any risk of this happening, as we surface from the
ごめんね、
water
いく
and
よ。
over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel.
いやだ、ここ。
A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus.
うわー、ここ通りたくねー。けどこれめちゃめちゃプレイしたら楽しいだろうな、ここ。
Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack.
え、ここ最高じゃん、このエリア。
We do have a payoff for this moment.
顔合わせるんでし
Clicker
ょ。
momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centerpiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
大丈夫、エリー。止まっちゃったけど。待って、エリー進まなくなっちゃったんだけど大丈夫？エリーさん？これライトとかってどうやって出すんだっけ？あ、ここか。操作方法出てこなかったから分かんなかったわ。出してよ。あったの、そういえば。コントローラーこうやってカンカンやってライトオンにするの。ちょっと待って、そこジョエルのシーンどころじゃなかったわ。もうどうやってライトつけるかで精一杯になっちゃった今。危ない危ない。
うわ、やば。
なるほど、こういう演出もあったんだ。トラウマにも程があるな。ここは消してもよかったんだろうか。まあ消さなくても消してもよかったね、あの演出は。まあでも確かにいらなかったかな。ここは開かないと。
For the final section, we eventually opened you out into a wider area
本当に
as you
狭すぎ
traverse
だよ。
through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current
よう
leverage
や
shown
く
at
出
the
たと思
start
ったら
to
また
slightly
謎解き
tougher
があったの
traversal
か。
puzzle to conclude the sewers. The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they couldn't cross.
そろそろここ
If
か
the
ら
player
出させてく
attempted
れ
to
っていう
jump
話
into the
だ。
water, they were not able to swim
うわ、
across
来た
the
ね。
ladder due to the water's speed. Then using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
これ大丈夫だよね。よかったよかった。バランス能力は完璧。しゃがみ要素すごい入れてくれるんだね。入れてくれるはおかしいが入れてくるんだね。この下水道パート。こっちでいいね。
The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to
長い。
a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built
そうか
anticipation
な。まあ確か
whether
に
there was success at the
出
top
口
or
感
not
はすごいあるけ
after
ど
all
ね。
you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
あ、ここか。思い出したわ。俺一回なんか2階から飛び降りて死んじゃったな。ここのステージ。そしてここはカリー。これはもう最後の方だね。エリーが罠に引っかかって殺されそうになるところだよね、多分。ここのシーンにもあるんだ。ザ・ハント。復讐のさらに復讐が待っている狩りのシ
For
ー
this
ン。
third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now. So we're coming in on Ellie, and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror in a way the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it, even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of the story that we developed still made its way into the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it.
もちろん。感情表現の一部としてはすっごい適切なものなのかもしれないけど、ゲームとして残すにはあまりにも無謀すぎたのかもしれないね。もうだってこの時のエリア
どこ行ったの？
声がある。やっぱ最後まで残したからか。
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on.
しかもほら見て、グラフィックもめっちゃ綺麗じゃない？
It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right.
そうなんだ。
Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. In early iterations of the fight, it was more real-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really. We must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get the jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally we tried a bunch where you almost sort of go around a bunch of trailers and try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long. It felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. The gas station was built
やっぱ作品としての色合いが濃いからさ、ゲーム要素っていうよりは流動的に流れるテンポ感のいい感情を揺さぶる作品っていう側面が大きいからさ。
When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes.
あんまりゲーム感強めない、かつそれでドラマ性のあるものを目指したんだろうね。
Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly.
このイノシシ狩りは長い割には感情の変化、激流が少なさすぎたんだろうな、きっと。
And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth it after?
あ、すごい、死んだなこれ。
By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. The boar would burst through the back, and it would follow it and finally enact revenge.
どうする？あ、歩くところが決まってるんだこいつ。決まったところしか動けない。このイノシシ。イノちゃんおいで。イノちゃん。なんか昔友達にイノちゃんっていたな。いたか？当たってはいるな。ただイノシシ一発では死なないやつ。やつの耐久性バカにできないぞ。どこ行ったんじゃい。いたイノちゃん。イノちゃんもっぱつ食らわしてあげるよ。やったか？まだいるな。弾全然無限だねこれ。どんどんひどくなってくのかエリンの残虐性は。おいどこ行ったイノブ。ブまでついちゃった。さっきイノちゃんだったのに。豚じゃないのにブーちゃんまでついちゃったよ。どこ行ったおいイノスケ。 いいのた？奥逃げたな、あいつ。逃がしはせんぞい。そこの下に逃げたのか。
The boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious. With the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless hunt. After this,
生と死について考えさせられるんだね、エリーに。これもやっぱ思い出させるんだろうな。これはプレイヤーも PTSD になるな。確かにこれをやってたら多分みんな辛かったね。辛かったね、非常に。こういうのもあったよみたいなのだけでいいね。なるほど、おもろい。めちゃめちゃおもろいわ。もっと欲しい未公開ステージ。正直俺はどれも入れてくれても全然大歓迎って感じはあるんだけど、やっぱ長くなっちゃうしね。長くなっちゃうし、打足感も出るし、ただ辛いだけみたいなところもあるからカットしたんでしょう。ただやっぱりこのおまけ要素として追加してくれていいよ、クリア後とかに。こういうのほんと大好きなので。他にもね、いっぱいね、さっきの最初のニードロックマンの言い方からすると、ボツになったシーンはたくさんありそうだから、ちょっと他のも出してくれたら嬉しいね。もしかしたら全然作ってないっていう段階のものたくさんあると思うけどね。ということで今回は、未公開ステージをね、やっていきました。このゲームだけじゃなくって他のゲームもさ、やっぱりこういうボツになったシーンとかってあると思うから、もしかしたらね、このラスアスの手法を真似て、DLC かなんかにこういうの組み込んでくるっていう人、ゲームもね、もしかしたらこれから出てくるかもしれないですね。ということで、めちゃ楽しかったね。俺は早くエリーが16歳、17歳だった頃のジャクソンでの日常を知りたい。それでは、良いラスアスライフ。